When Jonathan Pageau and Jordan Peterson and Matthew Pageau talk about symbols and the symbolic patterns of reality, what they're talking about specifically, especially when they're talking about reading those symbolic patterns, is the great Liber Naturae of the ancients, the book of nature. And I think one good way to think about it is to imagine you're walking through a forest and something happens. Maybe you rescue an injured bird or accidentally drink the blood of a dragon. Suddenly your eyes and ears are opened and you can hear the language of nature, the language of the forest, the language of creation, as Pageau puts it. You can hear the trees and the birds, the creatures of the woods speaking. The ants say,
"Work hard, be disciplined, be diligent, order, preparation."
The bees buzz with similar words.
Efficiency, diligence, social cohesion, protect the whole, die for the greater cause.
Order. And the birds of the air warn you of the danger ahead and sing the praises of God, and so on and so forth. And by the way, just as a brief side note, there is a literal version of this language of birds, like the cliff swallows, for example. When a flood is about to sweep through the land, they will actually build their nests higher up on the cliff above where the water line will be. If you know that, well, you know when a flood is coming. Or, of course, many different birds have different calls for danger and specific calls for specific forms of danger. Right? Squirrels, anybody who ever walks through the woods on a regular basis or hikes knows that squirrels have their danger call, crows, so on and so forth. Any hunter, fisherman, outdoorsman in general know at least a little bit about the language of creatures, the language of the birds, but there's also a more symbolic reading of the book of nature. And that's basically what we're going to learn about today. How to open up your eyes and ears to the language of the birds and the beasts and the stars in the heavens and all of creation. How to read the great book of nature. So to give you a brief background, the idea of a cosmos formed by letters, a poem of cosmic words, you could say, is found in the fragments of Heraclitus, where it relates to the Greek concept of logos, but also in Plato's Timaeus and in Lucretius's De Rerum Natura, and the early church fathers frequently referred to the book of nature, Librum Naturae or Liber Naturae, as part of a two-book theology, the book of nature and the Holy Scriptures, which are said to teach similar, if not the same things, because their author is one and the same. So the idea here is that the universe is a book filled with patterns and words that we can read, like reading a great poem, a great epic. The idea is that God brought everything into existence with his divine word, which imprinted purpose and meaning into each creature and every created thing. And these are the words and messages, which, like letters and words printed in a book, are symbols pointing us to higher meaning, giving us information about the Creator, about the fabric of reality, about the cosmos and how it all works, and even how we should live in the world. Go to the ant. If you're lazy, consider her ways and be wise. We'll get more to that in a moment. Every created thing is a symbol representing a higher reality and God himself. These symbols are like windows through which you can look and gaze into the immaterial realm that Christians call heaven and into the mind of God. And as a brief side note, you can find explicit references to the Book of Nature in St. Augustine, St. Basil, St. Gregory of Nyssa, St. Maximus the Confessor, St. John Chrysostom, Ephrem the Syrian, and many others. The ability to read this poem is closely related to hearing the music of the spheres, to see these patterns of reality and the meaning that they hold, has been called the ability to understand the language of birds. The birds symbolically representing the angelic intelligences called messengers in the Bible. Angelic messengers that are said to work hand in hand with God and the many logi, or logoi, however you prefer to pronounce that. As an interesting side note, we see the language of the birds. We see this motif in Sigurd, who learns the language of the birds when he kills the dragon Fafnir and accidentally drinks its blood. In Odin, who accesses information and hidden meaning invisible to others from his two ravens. In Dag the Wise of Sweden, who is so wise that he understands even the language of the birds. And in Solomon, of course, and David as well in some stories, who are also so wise that they could understand the language of the birds. The language of the birds, according to Rene Guenon, is, quote, angelic language, the ability to see into the invisible realm of the immaterial world, which is called different things depending on who you ask. Right? It's called the eternal realm of forms by Plato and the Neoplatonists. It's called the archetypal realm of the unconscious, which is the collective unconscious of the Jungians. It's called the spirit realm and also the immortal realm by the Taoists. And by the Christians, it's called the heavenly realm and the kingdom of heaven. It's called a few different things, so on and so forth. And although virtually every major religion and tradition has intuited this immaterial realm, we all see merely shadows and reflections. As Paul says, "For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face." So back to the symbolic patterns of reality. How exactly is this supposed to work? What is this theory about, and what are the details? So let's start with the logos in creation. God created everything through his word. This is the idea, the logos, which is the spirit of Christ, the wisdom of God. The Christ is the logos, is the truth, is the wisdom of God, who upholds all things, is in all things, and all things are in him. Right? This is not pantheism. This is closer to panentheism, although I think most Christians don't really like using that either, if I understand it correctly. Every created thing is a symbol revealing truth about God and reality, and the word, the logos, is in each created thing, in each creature. Therefore, all of creation is a poem and a parable filled with symbolic meaning. We see that in humans who are made in the image of God. When we build or create, we first create the image of what we are to create in our minds. Then we use this blueprint to inform the creation and make the image manifest in the world through our actions. We have the scriptures that say that God created all things with his word. And as a brief side note, many creation stories repeat this motif. From ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt to India, and all the way into the Far East, all the way into ancient China, as a matter of fact. I just learned this. Even the early Chinese text described Shangdi, if I pronounce that correctly, the creator god, as a personal god who spoke the universe and humanity into being. So we have the Holy Scriptures and many creation stories attesting to this, interestingly enough, but also through analogical reasoning, we can theorize that God, whose mind is a perfect transcendent mind, of course, which ours is created in the image of, if you believe that that's what that means, being created in the image of God, or at least in part. God began with the internal word as a divine idea, as Augustine says. And then he spoke that idea, or internal word, into existence. He spoke it into the world saying, let there be light, and there was light, for example. And using these divine words, he spoke each creature and all of creation into existence. And each creature to this day contains a unique manifestation of this one word, this logos. Right? So every creature has a unique logos. There are many logoi in the same way that one person may have many thoughts that he brings into being through the act of creation. The architect, for example, builds a cathedral from an image that originates in his mind, and then builds, let's say, a library with another image in his mind. Both of those images are the contents of the one mind of the architect. They are both distinct, but also one in that they are gathered together into the one mind of the architect, just as the many logoi, the many words of creation, are gathered together and bound up and joined into the one logos, who is Christ. Okay, so the second thing here is that the logos is the blueprint. The logos within each creature is its blueprint, kind of like a metaphysical DNA, and very similar. It gives the creature its form, its shape, and its story, its purpose. Right? It's the archetype. It's the predeterminations, the divine will that gives the creature, again, its form, its beginning, its end, its purpose, right? Its unique reason. And then 3, we read the logos like a poem or a book or a parable. A creature's logos or word can be read through natural contemplation. But what does that mean to read the logos? Is it exactly like reading a book? Well, no, not exactly, but it is very similar. Like a book, nature, creation, the universe, and everything in it has specific words that carry specific meaning. Unlike a book, you can't see each specific word with your physical eyes, but you can see the specific word of a creature, its logos, or put more simply, its symbolic patterns. Through reason and perhaps with the eyes of your heart, you can say. That's what I believe, and most Christians believe. Okay, so for example, when you look at a cheetah, for example, you can see its unique logos in its sleek, lean-muscled, aerodynamic form that is built for speed. Its form reveals something about its particular logos. Then beyond that, there are many symbolic spiritual lessons hidden in that logos, perhaps about speed and aerodynamics and much more besides. But to give the most obvious example of this, we can turn to the ant. So when the Bible tells a lazy person, it says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Go to the ant, consider her ways and be wise." It's saying about as directly as it gets that God left you a message about hard work in the logos of the ant. Go read that chapter of the great book of nature to discover how to be diligent and what rewards there are for those who are diligent and disciplined and organized. And when you observe the ants, you notice their work ethic. You notice their relentless determination and organization, their discipline, their diligence, and you also notice their remarkable foresight in storing up food for the winter. And as you take note of these things, you're seeing past the outer appearance of the creature and into the metaphysical purpose of the ant. So you're reading the logos of the ant. And then the fourth thing I wanted to speak on briefly here is that the logos reveals the God, right? It gives us evidence for God. Many, if not most, of our evidence for God actually comes from reading the words of God, the logoi in creation. For example, consider the argument from information, one of my favorite arguments. As we study the bodies of creatures from animals and plants to humans, we discover DNA. DNA reveals God's word because we are able to see its purpose and function, which leads to the following argument. Information codes and language systems are only known to originate from a mind, from an intelligence. DNA is literally a code, as Richard Dawkins says. Therefore, this information code had to have come from an intelligence, from a mind. The only intelligence and mind capable of producing DNA would be God. Thus, DNA reveals that God exists. We're able to reach this conclusion by studying and meditating and musing upon this specific corner of nature, this little, maybe a part of a chapter of this great book of nature. This is reading the book of nature, of course, right? This is looking past the outward appearance of the creature into its inner principle or its inner essence, as St. Maximus says. Natural contemplation does involve looking into the inner essence of the creature. Okay, so other arguments for God from the Book of Nature include the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, the moral argument, the miracles argument, the consciousness argument, the religious need argument, the beauty argument, the information theory, I guess we already went over that, the truth argument, the contingency argument, and the abundance of arguments argument. Many of those, most of those actually originate, of course, in reading the Book of Nature. And yeah, so the origin, of each of these pieces of evidence for God is in reading the Book of Nature. Okay, so that's all I have for you for today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe, comment, ask whatever questions you have below, and I will do my best to answer them to the best of my ability. And thank you for your support and for your time and your attention. I'll see you in the next one.